Coming up on Locked On Dodgers. This is a very special episode of Locked On Dodgers, something we haven't done in 23 days. We're recording an episode after a Dodgers loss. We'll talk about Bobby Miller, the decision to leave him in to try to get through the seventh inning, talk about the bullpen implosion, and we'll talk about the news with JD Martinez going to the injured list finally. That's what's on tap, so let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. Then you can be an everydayer just like we are. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio. Vince will be with you for the second half of this episode. We're doing a split episode. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And like I said at the top, we haven't had to record, like the Dodgers have only lost twice. This is only their third loss in August. And the other two came on Saturday, August 5th and Friday, August 18th. And we're 5 days a week, a weekday podcast. And so we had to talk about those losses, but not immediately after. By the time we recorded after the loss to the Padres, the Dodgers had won 2 of the 3 games and were on their way to winning 3 out of 4 in that series. So it was not a negative episode. And by the time we recorded last weekend or this past Monday, after they lost to the Marlins, the Dodgers had already swept the doubleheader with the Marlins and won that series. So this is our first time having to talk like immediately after a loss. And I'm hoping I remember all the key points. I like remembering why Dave Roberts needs to be fired, all that stuff. I'm going to try to do my best. I'm mostly joking. Although I did immediately, our buddy Brandon Johnson at BrandonJohn442 on Twitter, loyal listener, good friend. And he sent me a message during the game. And I think it's a legitimate question. So that's what I want to talk about first. After the implosion, the game wasn't over yet when he says, but the Dodgers had already blown the lead and gone down big and were well on their way to losing. And Brandon sent me a message saying, I'm going to be curious to hear your thoughts on having Bobby Miller pitch the 7th inning. It didn't make any sense from the beginning. And from a Dodgers win this game standpoint, I mostly agree with that, you know, when we talk about 60-40 decisions, that there's no clear-cut right and wrong decisions, but trying to make the decisions that give you the best chance of winning. Yeah, I think for this particular game, it probably would have made more sense to pull Bobby Miller after 6 innings. But I really liked the move in the moment. I was excited to see Bobby Miller coming back out because there's a risk reward for things other than this game. And specifically, we're talking about Bobby Miller's future as the Dodgers ace. Like that is their goal for him. And we saw a lot of that potential in this game. You know, when they think about Bobby Miller a year or 2 or 3 years from now, being the ace of their rotation, a lot of that is going to be confidence. And I think this was mostly look at it this way. If Bobby Miller had gotten through that 7th inning, I think it's a huge step forward in his development to go 7 innings for the first time, to have that trust of his manager. And, you know, the risk there, the risk for this game is obvious. He blew the lead. They lost the game. I'm not as concerned about that. Like the season's not over, but the season's over. The Dodgers have won the division. They're going to be either the 1 or 2 seed in the postseason, which means they don't have to play in the wild card series. You know, for all intents and purposes, I'm not going to say this game doesn't matter, but it matters a lot less than it would have the last time we had to record an episode after a Dodgers loss on July 30th, when the Dodgers that loss had dropped their lead in the division down to 2 games. This one didn't drop it at all. The Giants lost 2, and so the Dodgers still lead by 12 games. Their number went down to 26. They're going to win the division. So this game, the results of this game don't matter nearly as much, I don't think, as the long-term future of Bobby Miller. And I think that's what we saw was Dave Roberts saying he's pitching well. Other than that one inning, the fourth inning, he struggled a little bit, gave up 2 runs. Other than that, he's been pretty dominant. And so let's give the kid a chance. They tried a couple starts ago to let Bobby Miller get through 7 innings, and he didn't even get an out in the 6th inning. This time it was a step forward. He got an out in the 7th inning before a hit and a walk. So he left with 2 runners on. Unfortunately, Caleb Ferguson imploded. I'll talk about Caleb Ferguson in a minute, but I feel like the reward, if Miller had gotten through, would have been huge, and the risk to his future isn't that big. I don't think this is I'm never going to be able to pitch 7 innings. I think it's, it was a little bit of progress. He got 1 more out, and I think it probably fuels his fire to want to get through 7 innings next time he's given that opportunity. And so I think for Bobby Miller, this was the right decision, even though for this particular game, it was probably closer to a 40 or a 45 than a 55 or 60 as far as chance of working out. But I personally, and I think Dave Roberts, if we could give him Veritaserum like in Harry Potter and force Dave Roberts to tell the truth to the media, which he never will really tell the full truth, but I would guess that that's what we'd hear. That's kind of what this was a chance to take a shot on building up Bobby Miller for the future. Building up confidence-wise, not stamina-wise. So that's my thoughts, and I totally understand Brandon's point, and I basically agree with it. I wouldn't begrudge anybody who, when they saw Bobby Miller walking out to the mound for the 7th inning, thought, "What are you doing? Take him out. Let him go out on a high note." I get that, but I think that's what Roberts was doing, and I personally was excited about it. I was bummed that he couldn't do it, couldn't get through it. I was even more bummed that Caleb Ferguson couldn't pick him up. In a perfect world, the bullpen would pick him up. And he still he very easily could have gotten through that inning, still in line for the win, still got a victory out of this game, and the Dodgers still could have won, even with exactly what Miller did. But that didn't work out. So I am going to come back in just a second. I'm going to talk more about Caleb Ferguson and his role in this debacle. So I'll be back with that in just a minute. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. I want to remind you, you can catch every Dodger game, the Dodgers radio broadcast on the radio on SiriusXM or the SXM app. Just launch the app and search for Dodgers. You can also listen to this podcast on the SXM app by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear your comments in the YouTube comments section. If you're listening on podcast, we'd love to hear from you through social media or email or whatever. Vince will give you all that contact info at the end of the episode, like we always do. And thanks especially to our everydayers, those of you who are with us every weekday morning or almost every weekday morning. We really appreciate you. Love talking Dodgers with you, and we love hearing from you. Caleb Ferguson, he came in and he didn't get the job done. And Ferguson had been warming up in the 6th inning. That's why some of us were surprised to see Bobby Miller coming back out for the 7th, because Ferguson had already been warming up in the 6th. But he wasn't needed yet. And he did eventually come in the 7th. And it wasn't terrible at first. Like Will Smith almost threw out some dude stealing second, whoever's on first base. He almost threw him out while Bobby Miller was still in the game. So it very easily could have been 2 outs, 1 runner on. Instead, it was 1 out, 2 runners on. And then Ferguson, he got Stephen Kwan down 2 strikes, but couldn't put him away. Ends up giving up a base hit to tie the game. And then Jose Ramirez, just a good piece of hitting. Went the opposite way, hit the ball pretty hard through the gap, drove in the go-ahead run. The big problem, I mean, obviously, the Dodgers didn't score again in the game, and they were already down at that point. So you could say that was when the game was lost. You never know how things are going to go different if they keep it right there, if they had kept it at 4-3. Instead, Ferguson gave up a 3-run homer to Cole Calhoun, who was Oklahoma City Dodger just a few weeks ago. Dodgers let him loose, and he signed with the Guardians and continued being a Dodger killer like the jerk he is. Vince joked that maybe the Dodgers should have just called Cole Calhoun up from Oklahoma City and then put him on the injured list, pay him big league money to not play against them. But how could they have known that he was still going to do this garbage? Anyway, so that was the big blow. The 2 runs before that were charged to Bobby Miller, so he gets the loss. He's on the hook for 4 runs. A little bit of a Clayton Kershaw thing over the years. Clayton Kershaw has been the victim many times of the bullpen letting his inherited runners score. His ERA would be, especially in the postseason, his ERA would be much better if the bullpen would help him out once in a while. That's the fate that befell Bobby Miller in this game. And Caleb Ferguson, it's kind of interesting. Like, I don't know what to think about Caleb Ferguson at this point. Like, overall, his numbers look pretty okay, and at times he looks great, but he has had some notable clunkers, and every pitcher has clunkers. But I feel like the Caleb Ferguson's have been bigger and more notable, and it's hard to know, is this a guy you trust in a high leverage position in the postseason? And there's still 6 or 7 weeks or whatever it is left of the regular season. And so maybe he bounces back and maybe he's dominant by the time the postseason rolls around. But I feel like there's got to be at least a little bit of hesitance at this point of like, okay, or maybe it's like, can we only bring him in a clean inning? Or is he, although when he had his implosion against the Reds, that was a clean inning starting the inning and he couldn't throw strikes. So, he's kind of an enigma, and I don't really know what to think about Caleb Ferguson right now. And I'm not sure anybody else does either. Some people know what to think about him. The people who think the same thing every time anybody struggles, they think, I think their exact thought process is, I don't know what DFA means, but that's what I want the Dodgers to do to him. DFA gets thrown around way too much, people. Learn what DFA means before you use it. But I don't think Caleb Ferguson be DFA'd. I do wonder, though, if where he fits in the hierarchy come October, especially if they do have Walker Buehler in the bullpen in October and, Michael Grove or, some of these guys who are currently starters, in line to whether they are going to be long relievers or, Walker Buehler could be a high leverage reliever. He's got that mentality. He's got, if his stuff is there, that's the big question with Buehler, who knows? But they might have Blake Treinen, and where does Caleb Ferguson fit in? And if he's not at a point, we talked about this with Kenley Jansen a couple of years ago when we said, if Kenley Jansen's not the closer, he probably shouldn't even be on the roster in the postseason. And Ferguson, you could kind of make a similar case, like, and obviously you need low leverage relievers too. But there's probably not going to be as many blowouts in the postseason. And so, a perfect world, you would have your entire bullpen full of guys who are capable of being high leverage relievers, even if you have to use them in low leverage spots sometimes. Ferguson, it's going to be interesting. This version of Caleb Ferguson scares me for October is basically what I'm getting at. And I hope that he gets it figured out. I hope that whatever's going on, that he can find that consistency because they are a better team when he is lights out. And he's definitely had moments like that this season. But, I don't know which version of Caleb Ferguson is the real version or if there is a real version. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Love to hear your thoughts on the Bobby Miller thing, whether he was left in there too long. If you think I'm full of it on my explanation, I know I get accused of being a Dave Roberts apologist. I hope that, I think I made it pretty clear that, yeah, as far as this game goes, it probably wasn't the right move, but overall, I didn't mind the move. And, hopefully that's a position you can respect, even if you disagree with it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts on all this stuff. Vince is going to come in just a second. He's going to talk about JD Martinez finally go on the injured list. The Dodgers calling up Michael Busch. He'll talk a little bit about Ryan Pepio news and that. And so that's going to do it for me. So I will turn it over. Vince will be along in a minute.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Make sure to become an everydayer by subscribing and listening every single day wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. And remember, if you want to listen to the home broadcast for any game, all you got to do is download the SXM app or get SiriusXM and search for Dodgers, and you can listen to the home broadcast for any game. Yo, Dodger fans. Vince here to close out the episode. Like Jeff mentioned, I'm going to talk about JD Martinez, Michael Busch, Ryan Pepio, just a couple of things, clearing up some notes from what we learned on Tuesday. And the one thing we did learn on Tuesday is that JD Martinez is going on the injured list. We've talked about it a few times on this show of, why didn't they put him on the injured list before? Why they keep letting him get scratched right before the game starts? How long are they going to let this go? Do they hate Michael Busch? Why haven't they called him up? We got some of those answers along the way on that, mostly that Dave Roberts said it was literally a day-to-day thing. They didn't want to put him on they didn't want to put him down for 10 days if they didn't need to. With the DH, there's not a lot of substitution, so they, didn't feel like it would be costing them a roster spot. But it all finally came down to JD Martinez didn't recover the way he wanted, wasn't feeling the way he wanted. It was bothering him on his swing. Not every swing, Dave Roberts said, but when he would have to stride out a little more than normal, that's when it was bothering him. So he went on the injured list with groin tightness. He did not make the trip. It kind of sucks for him to not make the trip because he's, it would have been his return to Boston. There's still, Joe Kelly's technically returning to Boston. Kiki's returning to Boston. Obviously Mookie is the big return. He hasn't been there since he got traded before the 2020 season. And, in theory, he should get most of the love and everything else. But JD Martinez was also part of that World Series team. So it kind of sucks that he's not going to be part of it. But him going on the injured list is not a good thing in the sense of we wanted him to be on the injured list because we want him to be hurt. We didn't want him to be hurt, but if he's going to be hurt, we wanted him to be on the injured list if he needed to recover. And, Dave Roberts said there's no timetable for how long he's going to be out. He's going to sit and not do any activity for 7 days or baseball activity. No baseball activity for 7 days. And then they're going to, start working him back and seeing how he feels and everything else. So it feels like it's going to be longer than the 10 days because obviously, sitting for 7 of those days, no baseball activity. I don't think in 3 days he's going to be all of a sudden back to hitting baseballs. So in that sense, it's good. I'd rather this happen right now with, 5 or so weeks left in the season, 5-6 weeks left in the season. If he needs to take 2-3 weeks to recover, then he needs to take 2-3 weeks to recover. Anything more compromises him a little bit. Not as much, but we did talk about him in the preseason, not preseason, in spring training about how he didn't look that great. And we look back at past spring trainings, and for the most part, he wasn't as good a hitter in spring training as he was in the regular season. So maybe it takes him a little while to get going. If he has to sit more than 3 weeks, I think that's kind of where he'd be at, especially for a guy like him who Dave Roberts said the other day is addicted to hitting. He's and they've talked about it plenty of times how he likes to swing so much, and he always brings his iPad out to batting practice and looking at his swing, checking on his swing, everything else. I think right now the best thing for him is to get the rest if rest is helpful, and it obviously rest seems to be a potential thing that would help him because they wouldn't have him off baseball activities for a week if that wasn't something that could potentially help him. So it's good in that sense. Not obviously good for the Dodgers and everything else. Who it is good for is for Michael Busch. Michael Busch finally got called up, had been tearing it up in AAA. There was like literally nothing else for him to do in AAA. And we talked about it the other day. And, I kind of said, like, what's the point of when we talk about, like, should they put JD on the IL or should they not? And for me, it was like, and Jeff was kind of saying how they would rather have Michael Busch get every day at bats. Well, Michael Busch is 25 years old. He's been a prospect for a while. He's literally can't do anything else at AAA. Obviously he got called up earlier this year, but it wasn't in a role where he was playing often enough to really give us a sense of if he can hit major league pitching or not. And they asked Dave Roberts that question before, how is Michael Busch going to get regular at bats? And he said, we're going to try to. He said that they obviously are going to try to get him in there when they can. He played last night. He is not going to play today, but he's going to play on Thursday. They just weren't sure whether in the field or at DH. With JD Martinez getting hurt, at the very least, this is the perfect time for Busch to come up because he can just, when he does play, he can focus on being a DH and just worry about hitting. And, obviously, he probably wants to show and prove that he can play defense and play in the field. But at this point in time, if he can just come in and hit and give them something in that DH role or against right-handed pitching, that's going to be beneficial. He did go for 3 last night with 2 strikeouts. So, it's hard to kind of separate what he's doing in AAA and into the majors. It's a big, big, big jump. And we've seen that kind of more and more and more as the last couple of years going on. We even talked about it. I think we had a podcast episode with a guest. I forget who the guest was, talking about that, or someone said that the gap between AAA and major leagues is probably as big as it's ever been right now. And that's because, it's tough, and guys that are in the major leagues are there for a reason. And, we've seen a lot of guys that couldn't quite cut it or weren't good enough, at least to be on the Dodgers in the major leagues. And, Zach Rex, he's playing in Korea, Japan now. DJ Peters had one over there as well. Billy McKinney's floated around teams for a while now. He was there on that 2021 team. There's, these different, the Dodgers always have guys at DFA and play them when they need them, and then DFA them. They pick them up off waivers, they play them when they need them, and they DFA them when not. And there's a lot of guys that have success in AAA and just have not brought that success to the major leagues. We don't know if that's the case with Michael Busch yet, but again, like I said, 0 for 3, 2 strikeouts, not the ideal situation, but we don't know. Maybe, I don't know when he got the call. I don't know, did he get any sleep? There's a lot of factors into it. So we can wait for Thursday and moving forward and seeing if he gets the consistent at bats to see exactly what they got in Michael Busch. Because, like I said, it makes sense to play him when they can, especially, like I said, the Dodgers are obviously trying to finish as the number 1 seed. I would imagine that's still a goal of theirs, and to be able to catch the Braves. But if the other part is they need to know what they have on the team. They need to know what they have for October. They need to, go in healthy. They need all this other things to happen. That probably takes a little bit of precedence over being the number 1 seed, especially if they're going to be the number 2 seed instead. Like, if it's not number 1, they're going to be the number 2 seed, which is looking like what it's going to be. The home field advantage would really just come to the NLCS, and then in the World Series, they have a better record than every team in the American League, or they're right behind the Orioles by half a game right now. So, they would have the home field advantage in a lot of those things. Although, yeah, so, the Braves 81 and 44, Dodgers 76 and 48. So they're close enough. They play them. There's still a chance there, but I believe, getting guys at bats to see what they have and see if they can, find a way on this roster and then have a spot. And in a week, another spot will open up if JD's not ready. They can't call up 2 pitchers, so they would have to call up another position player. Do they go with Miguel Vargas? Do they go with Yanni Hernandez? Do they go for the versatility and defense, since they don't necessarily need the hitting right now, and then they don't know if Miguel Vargas will be able to hit. So, but regardless of all that, Michael Busch, I'd like to see him get consistent at bats against right-handed pitchers. I'd like to see him provide something to the Dodgers offensively, and make it a tough decision on does he belong on the October roster, and at the very least make it either a tough decision on what to do with him in the offseason, or raise his trade value, or show that, hey, you know what, he might have the ability to help us out in 2024. Like, there's a lot of reasons to do this evaluation right now, especially with the division essentially locked up, playoff spot essentially locked up. You can take those liberties. So we'll see what happens with Michael Busch and how that goes, but I'm glad to see him up, and I hope he can hit. Last part, Ryan Pepiot. We talked about it a little bit on yesterday's episode, and I was under the impression, I believe that's what it is, that since he was the 27th man, it's not, if he gets sent back down, optioned, it's not one of those where he has to wait 10 days. He can come back up without an injury, without somebody else going on the IL. Ryan Pepiot is still with the team right now. He is on the taxi squad officially. So if the Dodgers need a starter for Thursday at the moment, because Lance Lynn is going to go on Friday and everyone else is going to fall in line behind that. So the Dodgers need a starter on Thursday. Dave Roberts wouldn't say who it would be, but with Ryan Pepiot on the taxi squad, you can essentially pencil him in as either the starter or the bulk guy on Thursday. I don't know if this bulk innings guy with an opener is something they're working with a lot of the young guys. Like, essentially your starting rotation is going to have Kershaw, Julio, Lance Lynn, Bobby Miller, at least 3 of those 4, if not all those 4 right now in a potential postseason series. Emmett Sheehan's been throwing behind in a bulk role down in the minors, and it could be just obviously to save some innings for him, but also could be, that might be a role he needs to play in a potential, October series. Ryan Pepiot as well. I don't think the Guardians have a top of the lineup worthy of needing to throw an opener in order to, kind of throw their lineup out of whack. But who knows, if Cole Calhoun's in the lineup, maybe they do need to do that, because before this game, 43 games, 12 homers. So now 44 games, 13 homers. That's almost like a 50 home run pace, a little under a 50 home run pace against the Dodgers in his career. I don't get it. Like Jeff said, I texted him. I'm like, they should have moved him up and Phantom IL'd him and just let him hang out, because they might have still lost this game, but they might have not. I don't know. So, but either way, Ryan Pepiot, I would assume he's going to join the rotation. He's going to get in there on Thursday, and then after that, he'll just be a regular member of the rotation, filling in for Tony Gonsolin. And then Yarbrough. This is an interesting part too. I mean, and this might be what happens Thursday. Like, it might be Yarbrough and Pepiot, or Pepiot first, then Yarbrough, and see how many innings they can get out of them, because Yarbrough had gone behind Bobby Miller before. He didn't do that. He could potentially go behind Kershaw on Wednesday. I guess that's more a question of how long Kershaw goes, more rather than like that's the plan. But a good plan would be, Pepiot and Yarbrough for Thursday, close out that series, and then go into another series over the weekend in Boston, where you're going to play a little bit of a better team, and you might need a little bit more of your bullpen guys. So we'll see what happens, but good to see that Ryan Pepiot is likely the candidate to pitch for the Dodgers at some capacity this week. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to listen every day and become part of the everydayers. We're going to have to do something for these everydayers once the season ends. So if you're not an everydayer, join in now, because I just told you that we might have to do something for you after the season, or give you something, or somehow be involved in the if you want to be something, get involved with the everydayer. So go do that. Tell your friends, tell your family. There's a lot of great Locked On MLB hosts and podcasts, and I feel like we're one of those. And I feel like if you guys want to subscribe and get our numbers up, there's a long way for us to catch the top people, but we can climb slow and steady, baby. So go ahead and do that. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vincent's91. The best way to go hold of us would be to DM Jeff or I personally right now, just because the way Elon's Twitter is set up. It's a little bit harder to DM and change the settings and all that kind of stuff. So go do that. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you be here with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, tell your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.